that is where we'll begin. Where is Mark Andrews? His headspace. Has Eric and John had a chance to connect with him? Because as we covered earlier in the week, he did not make himself available post-game on Sunday night, nor was he available or present at the team's locker room cleanout the following day, at least when reporters were there. So here is John Harbaugh and Eric Costa talking about that very topic.
I'm going to tell you what, like Mark Andrews is one of the very best football players, one of the most committed football players. Nobody cares more about the success of this football team than Mark Andrews. And that's why, and he made numerous plays in the game up until the plays that everybody's talking about and in the season. And one of my messages to him was, we are not where we're at throughout the course of the season or in the game without the contributions of Mark, specifically in the game and the plays that he made. Spectacular plays all season. And then the unsung aspect of all the blocking he did in line and on the perimeter. So Mark Andrews is a great football player, and he's also a very tough-minded individual. So, yeah, he takes it hard, and because he cares so much. But I love Mark Andrews. Eric loves Mark. All of our players love Mark. Mark is a huge part of our future, and we love him. And you know, we're there for him. But if anybody can take a tough circumstance like that and handle it with class and grace and dignity and mental toughness, it's most definitely Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I agree with John. And Mark and I have communicated. I'll leave those thoughts to myself. But as far as Mark's contract goes, you know, he's no different than a lot of guys. In fact, I think all of our tight ends are in the last year of their contract coming up in 2025. So, you know, we'll have some decisions to make moving forward. Not as many, I think, you know, tough decisions this year, looking at it, which I'm thankful for. But obviously, as we look out, we'll have some tough decisions after next season. So a year from now, we'll have some tough choices and decisions to make regarding players. But, yeah, so that room right now, all three of those guys are in the last year of their deals. Ironically, Charlie and Isaiah and Mark, we're blessed to have, in my opinion, the best tight ends room in the league. And we'll be blessed this year on the field as well.
In other words, Sarah, maybe hinting at the fact that they'll be running it back with maybe the deepest tight end trio in the entire league for one more year.
Oh, they did more than hint. Yeah. I mean, John Harbaugh said Mark is a huge part of our future. Yeah. And you're obviously not getting rid of two other tight ends who are successful that are still on their rookie deals. Bobby, you and I predicted this on, the days are blurring together now, but I believe on Monday. Both you and I said, my prediction is that Mark was going to be back. And, and they all but said that. So, Eric Costa, you know, said that in fact, overall this year, he doesn't have a lot of big decisions to make. And he said, I'm grateful for that. Now he's like looking down the road, 2026. I may have some decisions to make, and he can work on those decisions early if he wants to start extending people sooner. But if your anger with Mark was to the point where you were hoping he was going to get the Lee Evans treatment or the Billy Cundiff treatment, that is not going to happen. Obviously, I think all of Ravens Nation is frustrated that he dropped that pass and that he fumbled before, and that is completely legitimate. I think what they're pointing to here is that based off of his history, which Billy Cundiff and Lee Evans didn't have, and what they're saying here is when John Harbaugh is saying, I gave this message to Mark Andrews that we wouldn't be here without you, he's actually giving that message to Ravens Nation, right? He's trying to say, we're not the same team without Mark Andrews, and that's why he's a huge part of our future. So we can punch air, but Mark Andrews is staying around, and as difficult as it was to watch him blow it, and he did blow it, Bobby, in the divisional round, as difficult as it was to watch that, I support the decision for him to come back.
And you hope that when cooler heads prevail among those who have been overly vocal about Mark's role in what became a extremely crushing loss, when cooler heads prevail, those will realize just how impactful 89 has been throughout his 7 seasons, being that he was, of course, one of Lamar Jackson's classmates in that 2018 draft class. It's back-to-back years now of AFC exits. Of course, last year they got one round further than they did this year. And I remember having this conversation with you a number of times over the last year or so, how you evaluate, how you measure success when everybody in that building knows at this point in the Lamar era, at this point in what they've done for the last few years, anything short of the Super Bowl can and probably will be referred to as a bust. Eric Costa was asked about how he measures this season and whether or not it was a success in his mind.
Perspective over 29 seasons, and we've had 27 seasons like this. I think my math is right. But I'm very proud of the team this year. It was a successful season. I'm not going to sit up here and say it was not a successful season. It was in just about every way of looking at it. But I'm disappointed, and John's disappointed. We're all disappointed. Our team's disappointed. We had higher aspirations, and we didn't achieve those aspirations and goals. But I think it was a successful season. I'm very proud of the team, the players, the coaches, support staff, everybody. And I've already moved on. I've started watching tape. I'm immersed in college and pro scouting right now and talking about contracts and negotiations and different things. And that's one, I think for me, that's one of the blessings of my job is it's very seasonal. And I'm in now one of my most favorite seasons, which is the off season, which is not, it's a misnomer because it's my busiest time of the year. But I love being a part of the solution, and that's what we'll be.
Sarah, the first thing that stood out to me with that answer right there from Eric is that not everyone in that building has the same luxury, especially the players, when it comes to being able to sink your teeth into something different. When you're a general manager, when you're in the scouting department, when you're a head coach, you have to turn a page. And while players can and they will eventually and dive into their off-season programs, and if you're a Nate Wiggins, maybe you want to add a few pounds. If you're Zay, maybe you want to potentially explore an off-season surgery with that knee, whatever it is. But players don't necessarily have the same luxury. And so for Eric to say that he's already over it, I get it. Like, he has to be, because that's his world.
Yeah.
Like, that's his world. But there's a lot of people in that locker room that I just don't know if they're there yet in their overall grieving process.
Yeah. And that the question of was the season successful? It's a gotcha question no matter what you say, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
if you say no, it wasn't a success, then it's like you throw out every thing that every player did or every coach did. Lamar's probably going to win MVP of the regular season. You won the AFC North. You swept the Bengals. You know what I mean? Like the offensive line and these young offensive linemen, Nate Wiggins coming in and having a sensational rookie season. Like, so if you say it's not successful, it's like, well, what about all those things over there? But then if you say it's a success, then it's like, well, what the heck? You got, what do you mean? What's your definition of success? Because you guys got knocked out early.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a gotcha question. I mean, was the regular season a success? Probably. Was the postseason a success? Heck no. The ultimate goal is to win the Super Bowl, and that's everybody's goal. But this team had a legitimate shot. And I think there's a lot of people out there would think that it was, if not the most talented roster, maybe the most talented roster. And they came up short and they lost a game that they gave away. And so the postseason, absolutely not a success, but obviously other smaller successes leading up to that.
The other thing is, too, imagine if he were to go the route of unsuccessful the way that he answered that. How does that play in the locker room? Maybe that's what you were just alluding to.
Yeah.
Because they did accomplish historical feats throughout this regular season stretch. I mean, this was a historic year. And you can go stat after stat after stat, milestone after milestone to back that up. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Eric was also asked about by Jerry Coleman, and this made for an interesting back and forth regarding Lamar's postseason narrative. And Eric was sure to stand 10 toes down in support of number 8 after, yes, when it's all said and done, he will going into his 8th season below 500 in an 8-game sample size in the month of January, 3-5 to be exact. But based on what Eric has seen, he did not mince his words here.
You know about Lamar, this is for both of you guys. How does he change the narrative from what he's done to the regular season as opposed to the postseason, changing what people think about him after the regular season ends? Is there anything more he can do?
And what do people think about him?
Well, there's the difference with the numbers and the way he performs between the postseason and regular season. So I didn't think he played poorly the other day, but that's perception out there. It all falls, it seems, on the quarterback.
I can say there's no player I'd rather have on my team than Lamar Jackson. He's, I think he's the best quarterback in the league. So that's my answer to that question.
Mic drop.
I love Eric having Lamar Jackson's back. I know that everybody listening has Lamar's back. I can't imagine any Ravens fan or anybody associated with the team doesn't want to see Lamar have success. And so, Eric wasn't going to get into that narrative and give it oxygen. So he obviously just lets everybody know who he wants on his team. And at the same time, the Ravens and Lamar are going to have to figure out the answer to that question. And if the answer is, it's just each game is its own and this is what happens, or if it's what we talked about yesterday. I know you were out, Bobby, but we went in depth of the stats of the turnover margin. And it's horrendous, both giveaways and the lack of takeaways. And so even if it's just that, it's just like we've got to protect the ball if that's it. Whatever it is, Lamar Jackson, the Ravens want to answer that question so that he can, get all the way to the promised land, so he can get to where his goal is. And so is he going to solve that in any way, shape, or form in what he could have said today? No. But hopefully inside the building, they're trying to figure out how they can get Lamar in the playoffs, in all of the playoffs he's had. I mean, that second half was MVP level. That Houston game last year was MVP level play. The first drive was MVP level play. But they're going to have to answer that question on the field of having this quarterback that only had 4 interceptions to 40 plus touchdowns to have that type of ratio in the regular season. They're going to have to ask themselves, how can I get Marlon Humphrey, who led all cornerbacks in the league with 6 interceptions, to maybe bring that over into the playoffs? And so they have all that talent, but eventually, even though they couldn't answer it today, they're going to have to answer that question, because this whole thing where they're just like lights out during the regular season, that's Lamar and everybody, where they're lights out in December, especially. They've been lights out the last 2 years, and then don't quite rise to that level of play. They're going to want to answer that internally.